All right, thank you guys for coming. Just a quick note, you can hear a lot better if you're up in the front sections or near the sides. Okay. So a little bit just about my background is I am from California. I spent the last 5 years in San Francisco. Attended the top entrepreneurship school in America, and I've also worked on 4 startups. And I've actually come here to Kiev to start the next company that I've been working on. And I've been here for the last 10 months. And what I'm going to be sharing with you, what I hope you take away from this, isn't necessarily as much high-level strategy. A lot of that is on the internet. What I really want to give you guys is a lot of usable tactics and strategies that you can apply to your own businesses and your own startups. Okay, so first off, I'm primarily targeting this talk towards people who are interested in starting businesses. I'll give a little bit of information about a structured process. If you guys have companies you want to start, or if you're in businesses, the first step you always want to do is research. Google is always your first step. A lot of people tell me business ideas, and I hear them all the time, and they haven't even looked up the ideas before, or they have a list of ideas without ever checking to see if they exist. If they don't exist, there's usually a reason that they don't exist yet. Oftentimes, market timing is very important, where an idea that would have made sense in the past exists now. And because of market timing, if you have an idea, there's usually a few other people working on the same idea at the same time. This has always been the case with businesses I've started, where there's always been people who have started a company that released like a month or two before or after mine that we didn't even know existed before that point. So research is the first step. See what exists, discover needs. The next step is to interview people. A lot of people you could just reach out to on Facebook or email that people who have portfolios, email addresses. Speak with people abroad because they have different tastes. For example, people in China, if your market were China, they're motivated a lot by scarcity. So if you have a product or you're promoting a product, people in China, if you know that there's a limited amount, then they're going to want it more. People in America, our culture is mostly motivated by reciprocity. So a tip for you is if you want to reach out to people, give them something for free first, because then they'll actually want to comply, because they'll feel obliged to reciprocate. So if you want to interview somebody, give them some feedback on a presentation they gave or a website, or give them some ideas, some value first, and that's a good way to get people to interview. And that works especially well with Americans. Talk about what are their needs, leave open-ended questions where they can talk a lot, but interviewing is very important because outside of your own mind, the world is very different, and so it's good to find out, does a market actually exist for something? What are the needs? The next step is surveying. You don't have to do this, but it's very helpful, and you do it after interviewing, so you can create questions. With Gametree, we ended up sending out surveys to about 500 or 600 people. We used it through a Contactio group and a Facebook group to get responses. And based on feedback we got in the interview process, we actually updated our survey with questions that we never would have thought of, and we discovered some new market needs that are greatly determining the course of our company. With surveys, you want it to be kind of numerical, open-ended. You can Google a lot for survey best practices, but actually do look this up, and Google very often. People don't use Google enough. And I know this as a background as an engineer, because that's how we figure things out, is Googling how to build stuff. So surveys, put personal information at the end, because that'll bias people's answers of how they're taking the test and answering questions. The next step is make out the specifications for your product. Think about what exists, what can you do differently. Know very clearly in your mind, out of the researching portion, you might have seen that there's a company that already exists, but if they're doing it badly, if their marketing sucks, maybe you want to stand out by doing your marketing better. Or if they have a certain value proposition that just that's missing, then that's where you want to target the market. But make sure that you differentiate and you focus. And last step is getting feedback on your idea. After you've listened to people, you've decided what you want to do, then talk to friends, family, go back to the people you interviewed, and basically just see what they say. Talk to people who would be potential customers, especially in your target market. One of the biggest problems I see people here in Ukraine doing is that they have great products, but they're really bad at marketing because they never actually test their ideas, get feedback on their ideas. And that brings me to the next point, is make designs. This is so important. I have wasted so much money and so many hours by trying to do things without having the designs in place first. And this is something I'm still iterating on, but it really helps a lot. Designs, they force you to think about your product very clearly. You can tell if a certain button, a certain function is missing through the designs. People often in applications use user stories first, but it's hard to actually think of all the user stories that you actually need to drive development or product creation. If you start with wireframes and then designs, you know what you're building. Also, a lot of the times when you're developing, you can start building the functionality and then add the designs later. But I've become a big proponent of having designs up front because you don't have to redevelop things, you don't have to change as much. So really, after you've figured out the need and you've made the specifications for the product, make the designs, get a good designer. So here's information on, I guess, finding talent, essentially. When it comes to finding designers for your product, what I've found to be a really good tactic is to talk to a lot of designers and get samples. Some designers will do it for free. Other ones you can pay a small amount to. I've noticed that designers tend to give you a lot better effort, and they'll try a lot harder if you give them even just a little bit of money. And they put in a lot of effort because creating a design is a big process. And oftentimes, there's not one designer who's going to be the best. It's a combination of ideas from other people, because ultimately, a bunch of people working together is going to create something better than one person by themselves. So what you can do is pay some people for samples and take your favorite elements of them together and combine them. Also, new designers, if you're bootstrapping a new company, are great because oftentimes people starting off their practices, they're talented, but they don't have the client base yet. So they'll be willing to work for less, so they're building out their portfolio. So as an entrepreneur, if you're bootstrapping, it's good to look for these people and to kind of avoid the higher priced ones because they're going to be sometimes 4, 5, 10 times the cost for the same quality. Also, finding talent is, if you're looking for people in America, Google, ask around, ask friends. If you're a foreigner here, that's a lot of what I did, is I just asked people what are the good places to post to find employees. A personal strategy that I've used many times is also using Upwork and LinkedIn. Upwork, it's for contractors. I've hired a number of employees through doing this methodology because you can really filter very well for different skill sets, price points, setting up lots of interviews. And also LinkedIn is nice. You could send a friend request or a connection request, and you can send a message with it. So you don't have to have a $1,000 premium account to be able to contact a lot of people. So when it comes to recruiting for your startup, after you've found people, do not talk about the low pay or the long hours, because a lot of people think of startups, and those are what they think of. And a lot of startups is that. But what you want to do is talk about what are the perks, what are the benefits, because people aren't entirely capitalistic. We're not totally just motivated by money. A lot of people, especially this is a trend, really hate their jobs even though they pay well. That's a lot of the reason why a lot of people are leaving Wall Street and investment banking to join startups, for example. So one thing that you can sell people on as an opportunity is if you're targeting an international market, you could sell people on practicing their English. With some of my team right now, I think this was a big selling point, is that by working in an English-speaking environment, it's an opportunity for them to practice and to get inside of that world. Even if their full career isn't with your company, it's a good stepping stone. And any one of these drivers is going to lower the amount of money that they'll be willing to work for, which if you're bootstrapping a company is a really good thing, and it's necessary if you're ever going to be successful, because that's the thing that you're missing most, that most companies will have. A cool market. A lot of people, it's easier to start a product abroad, for example, in the United States, and then launch somewhere else than to do the opposite. Because, for example, if you're bringing a product to Ukraine, if it exists in America first, people just have a natural association to think that it's a stronger brand. So be aware of that, and that's just a consideration when you're deciding which market to approach. And again, these are things that you want to relate to people when you're interviewing them. Interesting project from the ground up. A lot of people, especially locally, are working in outsourcing companies. A lot of people are consultants. A lot of people have backgrounds where they spend a year, 2 years, 3 years at different companies, or they're at large companies where they fill very little roles or they never get to interact with or feel like they're a part of the product. So an important thing when you're recruiting people is to tell them that they're getting in on a big vision and that it's going to be fun for them to work on, that their opinions matter, they get to work on a variety of tasks. And all of these things that you can sell to them, It's going to make ways for them to want to work with you besides just pure cash. So a little bit of legalities. A lot of this is on the internet. This isn't legal advice, but overall, I think it's better to wait to incorporate. You usually don't really need to incorporate unless you have a high liability company where you need a level of protection, but usually that's not the case, and it's very uncommon for any businesses to ever pursue legal action against small companies just because it takes a lot of time and money, and it just isn't worth it because small businesses don't have the money to pay people even if they win. The most common thing will be like an infraction. They'll just ask you to stop doing something. Don't worry too much about legalities, in my opinion. When you do incorporate, if you want to incorporate in the United States, Delaware C Corporation. C Corporation is the most popular legal entity for startups, and Delaware is the best state to incorporate in because they have the easiest, most straightforward, and affordable law for this. It's also the most attractive for investors if you're planning to attract either American or even international capital. This is the most familiar legal structure in the world for that. You can actually set this stuff up yourself if you really want to. I answered a Quora question. I've been through this process a few times, and you could write that link or just Google my name and incorporation, but there's a little guide. But normally you could pay like $2,000 to $10,000 for legal fees just to set up a business. But if you do a little bit of research, you can actually do this yourself in like one day, and it's not actually that hard. So that'll save you quite a lot of money. All right, here we have fundability. So eventually you're going to want to have some investment. You don't necessarily need to, and I think it's an overhyped thing right now where everybody is pursuing like the money, but the things that matter most now more than ever is traction, and for many companies this will be users and also revenue. It's becoming more and more important before you raise funding to have large amounts of users, large recurring retention, income. Those things are really going to help make it a lot easier and to raise, and you'll raise at a lot better valuations. Don't try to raise money too soon because it's going to end up being a lot of time wasted. So really focus on the business at first. And when it comes to the business, beautiful design is really important for a startup. People can look at an app, and if you did a good job with your designs, they can tell what it does. They think it's real just by seeing it. So really invest a lot in the design, and a lot of investors have told me like the most important thing is honestly just how the application looks. So really think about that and invest for that part. Another one is a good onboarding process, because if all of your users are new, then you only have new users, and they are not going to come back if your onboarding process is bad. If you have a pre-existing application or it's bigger, you started a long time ago, onboarding isn't very important. But it's really good to have at the beginning as a primary focus is to figure out why aren't users signing up and how to drive that, get them to come back. For example, with one company, it turned out that we only had 50% of people who are downloading the application that were actually installing and creating accounts. And it turned out it's because we were targeting a young teenager demographic. And in America, they all use Instagram instead of Facebook. And we didn't have Instagram login. So that was something we added, and immediately our amount of users, without changing anything else, doubled. With our current company, we have a similar thing. So make sure that you have an easy, good onboarding process, and that's a really big priority. Don't keep adding extra features or improving features until you have a good onboarding process. The last bit here is actually solve a problem. If you have a good product, people will come. It'll grow, word of mouth will happen. Focus more on development than marketing. Tons of people are competing for attention, and this is especially true in America. And so if you actually solve a problem, then you're naturally going to do well, whereas if you're doing marketing well, then your people are going to drop off. The last note I want to leave you on is just to get and use feedback from your customers. This is how you figure out if the onboarding is working. This is how you find out, do people like your logo, your brand, your name? Really, really do this a lot. Constantly be talking to your users, even like the whole supply chain. But this is how we grow. I've seen a lot of talks where teachers say that the most important thing that determines whether they think a student will be successful early on is if the students ask for feedback and use feedback, and the same is true for companies. Every startup I've ever worked on, we always had something really far off at the beginning that we discover through listening to customers. And if you're here in your markets in the United States, it's a little bit harder, so it's extra important to think about proactively building those channels. With Gametree, the current company, what we have is an immediate message that gets sent directly from somebody on our team as a first chat connection that they have. And it's basically an immediate link that they can have to talk to us in a really casual manner. So we want to make sure that people can talk to us as easily as possible. Thank you guys again. My name's John UK. My email address is there if you want to reach me. And just to tell a little bit about the current company is it's a recommendation platform for gamers to meet friends and also to discover games. It uses people's tastes and their psychology, their personality to help them find things through a cluttered world. I have time to answer a couple questions, and then feel free to find me around the conference center if you want to chat for any reason or you want feedback on anything. Any questions? All right, thank you guys.